This has been happening to you for a long time and you still don't see it, not when they first looked at you. Not when things started to feel different. Not even now, because nothing about it looks obvious, it feels normal. And that is exactly why you missed it. Because when something feels normal, you do not question it. You accept it and keep moving. And that is how it works. It stays quiet. It stays hidden. It keeps repeating. And you stay inside it without realizing something already changed. And if you feel that you already know something is not right, you thought people were distant. You thought conversations lost energy. You thought things just changed. But it was never random. It was never just timing. It was always something deeper that you did not see. And that is what makes it dangerous, because you cannot react to something you do not recognize. And most people feel this again and again without realizing that it is not random behavior. It is a pattern repeating in ways that feel normal but are not. And if you feel that you already sense something is off, it does not happen in one moment. It happens slowly. It happens quietly. It happens in small shifts that feel irrelevant. And that is why your brain ignores it, because it does not look important. It just feels like a small difference and you adapt to it without questioning it. And then one day something feels off, but you cannot explain it. And by that point, the pattern is already there and you are already inside it. And that is where most people get stuck. You felt something change, but you could not explain it. You noticed something, but you could not define it. And that is what keeps you stuck. Because if you cannot explain it, you cannot react. And if you cannot react, it keeps repeating again and again, and it starts to feel like something about you is wrong. When in reality, something about how they see you was already decided before you even had a chance to show anything different, and that changes everything. Everything connects. Everything you felt, everything you questioned, everything that seemed off but never made full sense, it was never separate. It was always part of the same pattern. And once you see that pattern, you begin to understand. It was never about isolated moments. It was about perception forming early and shaping everything that followed. And that is why nothing you did changed anything, because the outcome was already influenced before you even acted. And most people never realize that most people stay inside this pattern without realizing it, because they focus only on what they say, what they do, what they try to improve, without questioning what others already believe. And that is the hidden part, because it is not visible in actions, it is visible in reactions. And if you are not paying attention to those reactions, you miss everything, and you keep trying to fix something that was never created by your behavior. And that is why nothing changes once you see it. Everything changes. You start understanding why things felt off, why energy changed, why people reacted in ways that did not make sense before. And that awareness shifts everything, because now you are not reacting blindly anymore. You are seeing what is happening beneath the surface. And that is the moment where everything begins to change, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And that is where everything starts to shift. This is where it gets deeper, because once you see it, you cannot go back. You start noticing everything. Conversations, reactions, pauses, silence. Everything starts to feel different because now you are paying attention. And once you see the pattern, it becomes impossible to ignore. And most people never reach this point because they never question what feels normal. And that is why they stay inside it without realizing what is actually happening. And once you reach this point, everything begins to connect. And that is when it starts to feel real. This keeps happening because people accept what they feel without understanding what is causing it. And that acceptance allows the pattern to repeat again and again without interruption. And once you see it clearly, you begin to realize how often it has been happening across different situations, different people, different moments. And that is when everything starts to make sense, because now you understand it was never random. It was always following the same pattern. And that is what most people never see. That realization is uncomfortable because it forces you to see things you ignored before, and once you see it, you cannot go back, and that is where the shift begins. Because awareness changes how you interpret everything, even before anything external changes. And that is what most people never experience because they never reach the point where they understand what is actually happening, and that is why they stay stuck repeating the same patterns without knowing why most people never break this pattern, because they never reach the point where they understand what is actually happening. And without that understanding, everything stays the same, no matter how much effort they put into trying to change it. And that is what keeps them stuck, because they are trying to fix something they do not understand. And that creates a loop where nothing changes no matter what they do. And the more they try, the more it feels like something is wrong with them, when in reality they are reacting to something they never fully saw. This is not about effort. This is about perception, and once you understand that, everything starts to make sense, because now you see why things happened the way they did, why people reacted the way they did, and why it felt the way it felt, even when you could not explain it before. And that awareness is what changes everything, because now you are no longer reacting blindly. You are starting to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface. And that is what most people never reach, if this is starting to make sense. Comment, I see it, because once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it anymore. And that awareness is what separates people who stay stuck from people who begin to understand what is actually happening. And most people never reach this point, because they never question what feels normal. And that is why this keeps repeating for them again and again without interruption. And once you see it, everything starts to feel different now. Everything connects. Everything. You felt everything you questioned. Everything that never made sense suddenly becomes clear, and that clarity changes how you see everything moving forward. And that is what makes this moment important, because once you understand it, you cannot go back, and that is where everything starts to shift. Because now you are seeing what was always there but never noticed, and that changes how you interpret every interaction from this point forward. This has been happening the entire time, and you did not realize it. And now that you see it, everything changes, because once you understand what is happening, you begin to understand why it kept repeating and why it felt the way it felt. And most people never reach this point because they never question what feels normal. But now you do. And that is what changes everything. And if this made you think, comment, I see it. Because this is the moment where everything starts to shift, and once you see it, you cannot ignore it again.